After nightfall, on the first day of the 6th month, Mitsuhide reached the top of Oinoyama. The road going to the right would take him to Yamazaki and Tenjin no Banba. It was the Setsu Highway. Were he to go down the hill to the left, the road would lead him to Kyoto. Here, he went down the hill to the left. Just as he crossed the Katsura River in force, the night gave way to first light. In no time at all, the enemy surrounded the Honnoji, the temple where Lord Nobunaga was staying, and came bursting in tumultuously from all four sides. At first, both Nobunaga and his pages thought that a quarrel had broken out among the lower orders, but nothing could have been farther from the truth. The enemy raised the battle cry and blasted Nobunaga's residential quarters with their guns. "This is treason," Nobunaga stated. "Whose plot is it?" "They look like Akechi's men," Mori Ranmaru replied. Nobunaga's response was, "What's done is done." In my opinion, there is no more fascinating figure in all of Japanese history than that of Akechi Mitsuhide, a traitor who through a single action, a single night, would change the entire trajectory of Japan's future. What's more is that although theories and speculation exist on why he did what he did, we don't know for certain what drove his actions. Was it ambition? Revenge? A quest for justice? It is not completely understood. What we can do, however, is examine what we know about his life prior to his turn, and explore the nature of a man who has not only come to be remembered as one of the greatest military commanders of his age, but also a significant patron of the arts. Let us examine the man behind Japan's greatest mystery. Not much is known about Mitsuhide's origins. Although it is believed he was born in the late 1520s, it is not clear exactly where, but that it was likely within Mino province. He was the son of Mitsutsuna of the Akechi, a branch of the Toki family who could trace its own lineage back to the prominent Seiwa Genji. Yet his father would die while Mitsuhide was still quite young, leaving his uncle, Akechi Mitsuyasu, to care for him. The Akechi had been in the service of the Sato family, the governors of Mino, and thus owed their allegiance to its daimyo, Saito Dosan. Dosan had been a shrewd figure, earning the nickname the Viper of Mino. He had clawed his way to the top of the province after murdering his rivals and ousting its former lords. He would even defeat an incursion by the Oda family of Owari in 1547. Following this, peace had been negotiated between the Saito and Oda, with the eventual forming of an alliance bound by the marriage of Dosan's daughter, Nohime, and Oda Nobuhide's son, Nobunaga. In 1554, Dosan had retired in favor of his eldest son, Yoshitatsu. Yet quickly it seems he began to regret the decision, perhaps instead wishing for one of his other sons to succeed him. Before Dosan had done anything drastic himself, Yoshitatsu caught wind of his father's potential ploy and attacked him in 1556, throwing Mino into civil war. The Akechi sided with Dosan, but unfortunately he would be defeated at the Battle of Nagaragawa, where he would die before Oda reinforcements could reach him. With the Akechi on the losing side, their home of Akechi Castle would soon come under attack. Akechi Mitsuyasu would be forced to commit seppuku, while Mitsuhide and others were able to escape. Mitsuhide, who was perhaps in his late 20s by this point, is believed to have first fled to Wakasa before eventually finding his way into the service of the Asakura clan of Echizen. The Asakura had become a significant force in the Hokuriku region and were at this point under the rule of Asakura Yoshikage. Stories tend to paint this portion of Mitsuhide's life as when he truly began to emerge as a man of some talent. He was able to work his way up within the Asakura, as he was someone who is said to have exhibited capabilities that others were perhaps envious of. Yet that does not mean he was always on the best of terms with his lord Asakura Yoshikage, as one theory believes their relationship was tarnished by misinformation given to Yoshikage regarding Mitsuhide. Yet while Mitsuhide spent time under the Asakura, back in his home province of Mino, another great upheaval would soon occur. It began with the death of Saito Yoshitatsu in 1561, which led to his son, Saito Tatsuoki, assuming power. Yet without the strong Yoshitatsu in command, cracks began to form within the Saito, causing yet another incursion from Owari. It was here Oda Nobunaga, now the undisputed head of the Oda family, fresh off of his miraculous victory against the Imagawa at Okehizama, invaded Mino, eventually seizing control of the province by 1567. Back in Echizen, Asakura Yoshikage had accepted the arrival of Ashikaga Yoshiaki, the brother of the former shogun Ashikaga Yoshiteru, who had been assassinated in 1565 by a combined force of Miyoshi and Matsunaga, intent on dominating the capital and Bakufu. Yoshiaki, who had been aided by Hosokawa Fujitaka, had escaped Kyoto and was in search of a mighty clan to champion his cause. He had been hoping that Asakura Yoshikage would have the strength and power to liberate Kyoto from the usurpers. Yet Yoshikage, perhaps somewhat hesitant, made no concentrated effort to achieve this. However, it was Yoshiaki's time in Echizen that brought him into close proximity with Akechi Mitsuhide. Supposedly, Mitsuhide was made to entertain Yoshiaki while in Echizen, and although Asakura Yoshikage likely thought nothing of this, what ended up happening instead was the deepening of a bond between the two. Yoshiaki must have come to trust Mitsuhide, and Mitsuhide, understanding Yoshiaki's plight, must have wanted to help him in any way he could. And being that Asakura Yoshikage seemed unlikely to answer Yoshiaki's call, they were in need of another powerful daimyo to take up such a responsibility. The answer was clear: the now mighty Oda Nobunaga. Working alongside Hosokawa Fujitaka, they brought their plans to Nobunaga's attention, asking he march west to seize Kyoto in order to restore Yoshiaki as the legitimate Ashikaga shogun. Nobunaga, who was likely all too eager to march west as it is, readily agreed, and by 1568 he had smashed his way deep into the Kansai region and captured the capital. By this point, Mitsuhide had left the Asakura clan behind to formally pledge himself to the Oda. Now, it is not entirely known if Mitsuhide knew about Nobunaga's true intentions or not, but as we know, Nobunaga's championing of Yoshiaki wasn't simply out of a pursuit of justice or to restore power to the Ashikaga. Rather, Nobunaga simply stepped into the same position that the Miyoshi had been in before him, dominating the shogunate for his own aims. For Nobunaga was after his own ambition, and through his seizure of the capital he had become a legitimate authority in the heart of Japan. Yoshiaki would realize this all too late, and unfortunately for him, there were few who would be determined to stay loyally by his side in the face of the Oda, as some of those who had been his most ardent supporters, like Mitsuhide and Fujitaka, would eventually come to abandon him, placing their faith instead fully within Nobunaga. Now, to understand Akechi Mitsuhide, we must also seek to understand Oda Nobunaga, a figure of sheer magnificence. His role and impact on Japanese history is legendary. Truly the leader Japan needed at that time, with a grand vision to unite the land and drag it from its chaotic state into a new age, to reform the nation from the ground up, modernizing and restructuring, forging the great foundations that his successors would come to build upon. Those who served Nobunaga came to know their place in his ambition, serving a greater purpose than they had known before. Yet that does not mean their loyalty would not be put to the test, as opinions on Nobunaga, particularly among his enemies, perhaps came to view him as yet another tyrant in Kyoto, using the facade of legitimacy for his own conquests, both militarily and politically. And for this, Nobunaga was not immune to betrayal. One of the earliest and most significant examples of his allies turning against him came in 1570, when after Nobunaga began to march against the Asakura of Echizen, the Azai of Omi, who were bound to Nobunaga through marriage, turned on him in support of the Asakura. Nobunaga would of course emerge victorious from this conflict, and put his enemies to the sword, not only in the forms of his brother-in-law Azai Nagamasa and the obstinate Asakura Yoshikage, but also countless others, including his infamous and deadly attack on Mount Hiei, as the monks there had allied themselves against the Oda. Nobunaga's ruthlessness was on full display here, burning the historic Enryakuji temple and slaughtering many monks and civilians. In fact, it is believed that a direct result of this event would later lead to the rise of Nobunaga cultivating the image of himself as the Demon King of the Sixth Heaven, a move done to potentially discourage future rivals and enemies. This is really where the popular idea of Nobunaga splits in two. On one side is the benevolent unifier, a figure who generously rewards his loyal and hardworking vassals. And on the other side is the villainous Demon King, who cares not for what he destroys, who he kills, and even lacquers the skulls of his defeated rivals in gold. In reality, the real Nobunaga was likely somewhere in the middle of these two personas. Yet his sporadic behavior, as noted by his old nickname, the Fool of Owari, does paint the picture of a man with a very complex nature. And certainly, this betrayal in 1570 would not be the last he would suffer. In 1577, Matsunaga Hisehide rebelled against Nobunaga, and although Nobunaga attempted reconciliation, Hisehide was firm in his conviction and fought to the death. A year later, Araki Murashige rebelled against Nobunaga as well, and although he was besieged, he would eventually escape to the safety of the Mori. And lastly, by 1579, rumors of treason would even sweep through the Tokugawa household, causing Nobunaga's loyal ally, Tokugawa Ieyasu, to carry out the deaths of both his wife and eldest son. So, as we can see, rebellion against the Oda was something that Nobunaga had to endure throughout his reign. Despite all the good he would do and progress he would accomplish, enemies were consistently rising, and through all of this, Mitsuhide was there to witness it all, even coming to take part in many of these events. Now, Mitsuhide's own relationship with Nobunaga is one which has been highly dramatized over the years, with portrayals of Mitsuhide having a strong admiration for Nobunaga, and Nobunaga perhaps having some sort of resentment towards Mitsuhide. What is an interesting question to ask, and one which has been frequently answered in various stories, is how Mitsuhide first came to know Nobunaga. In truth, we don't know, but it is easy to see how Nobunaga was a figure Mitsuhide would have been familiar with from rather early on. Having come from Mino, Mitsuhide may have either known about Nobunaga prior to his exile or come to hear about him from his exploits following the victory at Okehazama and conquest of the Saito. Many throughout the surrounding provinces would have heard riveting tales about his exploits. It is not wild to speculate that Mitsuhide would have perhaps been captivated by such a figure, especially when compared to his current lord at the time, Asakura Yoshikage, an individual who bore no great ambition himself. Thus, Mitsuhide invested himself into this new path, joining the Oda and seeing what true ambition looked like firsthand. What we do know is that throughout nearly the entirety of Mitsuhide's time serving Nobunaga, he did so loyally and to the utmost of his ability. And truly, this is where we see Mitsuhide become the famed commander he was known to have been. Yet he was one amongst many. One of the most significant factors in Nobunaga's rise were his many capable generals who carried out his orders often to great success. Mitsuhide was joined by figures such as Hashiba Hideyoshi, Shibata Katsuie, Maeda Toshiie, and so many others. So his own triumphs needed to be significant in order to stand out. And we certainly see that he was someone who Nobunaga did come to greatly trust, based on the important tasks he received from him. In time, Nobunaga saw fit to grant Mitsuhide the area of Shiga in Omi province, where Mitsuhide would construct Sakamoto Castle. Later, by 1575, Mitsuhide and other members of the Oda were even granted further positions in the government, as Mitsuhide was named Junior 5th rank. It was here he would adopt the Kotero family name, and would go on to be called Kotero Hyuga no Kami. Although for simplicity, we will continue to refer to him as Akechi Mitsuhide throughout the remainder of this video. By the late 1570s, Mitsuhide would be ordered to continue the Oda campaigns westward, where he was met with more military successes. Nobunaga would even come to personally remark upon the greatness of Mitsuhide's achievements. Gyuichi commented on such an occasion in 1579, remarking, "On the 9th of the 8th month, Kotero launched an assault on Kurai, where Akai Akuemon had entrenched himself. As the attackers closed in on the castle, the defenders came out in force. With a rush, Kotero powered his way into the outer enclosure. After a dozen or so warriors of note had been killed, the defenders surrendered, pleading in various ways for mercy, and made off. When Kotero reported in full detail on the above, Nobunaga graciously rewarded him with a laudatory letter. "During your long campaign in Tamba province," the letter said, "your tireless exertions have earned you fame and glory, second to none." In town or country, there could be no greater honor. Still, while Nobunaga would praise Mitsuhide, perhaps more famous are the stories where Nobunaga is believed to have mistreated Mitsuhide. Now, it needs to be said that these stories are just that, stories. We don't know for certain whether or not they actually occurred, but given Mitsuhide's later actions, they may still provide excellent insight when speculating about his own intentions. One tale suggests Nobunaga forced Mitsuhide to drink sake, despite Mitsuhide's own lifestyle choice of not consuming alcohol. Nobunaga may have even gone so far as to hold a blade to Mitsuhide's throat. Nobunaga is also perhaps said to have verbally insulted Mitsuhide in front of others, calling him something like kumquat head, and in some tales even going so far as to physically beat him. What sheds some legitimacy onto such tales is the fact that Nobunaga's actions even caught the attention of Jesuit missionaries who were present at the time, as Louis Frois commented on Nobunaga's decreased opinion of Mitsuhide. Nobunaga may not have even cared too greatly for the work Mitsuhide did for him, despite his occasional praise, as by the late 1570s, Mitsuhide had been ordered to build relations with the prominent Chosokabe clan of Shikoku, and after much solid work and diplomatic progress had forged a significant bond. Yet, shortly thereafter, Nobunaga changed his mind and began planning out an invasion of Shikoku which would undo everything Mitsuhide had achieved there. However, the most severe story, though, by far, comes from the Edo period. Yet it is hard to say if its actual origins lie in truth prior to that. This is the infamous story of Mitsuhide's mother, who, as the story goes, had been handed over to the Hatano clan as a hostage in exchange for their surrender, only for them to then kill her once Nobunaga purposefully had the Hatano lord executed, while knowing full well that Mitsuhide's mother's life was at stake. Such reckless disregard for the family of his vassals certainly would paint Nobunaga in the worst of lights. And altogether, these stories further the duality in how we view Nobunaga. On one hand, he is a benevolent and just leader, entrusting Mitsuhide with worthy tasks and rewarding him for his efforts, while on the other hand, these stories paint a side of Nobunaga that ridiculed and abused one of his most significant vassals. Did Mitsuhide deserve this treatment? If once again it is to be believed that there was tension in their relationship. It doesn't appear so. What we do know about Mitsuhide is that he conducted himself in what appears to be a very specific way. He supposedly forewent the drinking of alcohol, took no mistresses, and stayed loyal to just his wife. He seemingly did not boast about his accomplishments, but still incurred the envy of others. He followed the orders given to him and provided great results. Not to mention, he was an avid poet, frequently writing and partaking in poetry gatherings. Some even say he may have been secretly a Christian, as his daughter, the famous Hosokawa Gracia, or Garasha, had become. Above all else, he was respected and astute. No one had any idea what he would do one day. There had been no murmurs of Mitsuhide's treason. There had been virtually no reason to suspect such a thing, save from one. On the 24th of the 5th month, the year of Tensho, 1582, the warrior commander Akechi Mitsuhide sat down with 8 people in a temple on Mount Atago, north of Kyoto, to compose a 100-verse unit renga, hyakuin. He, along with a few other commanders, had just been ordered by the warlord Oda Nobunaga to take his army west to help their fellow commander, Hashiba Hideyoshi, who was trying to subdue the warlord Mori Teramoto in Takamatsu. The hyakuin, called Tensho Funen Atago Hyakuin, or simply Atago Hyakuin, opened with Mitsuhide's Hoku in 575 syllables, declaring, "Toki wa ima ga shitashuru satsuki kana." Now, this poem can be interpreted in several ways, but no matter how you read it, it remains ominous. One of the interpretations plays upon the opening word, Toki. As we know, Toki was the family from which the Akechi had descended. Thus, this poem can be read as, "The Toki must now rule the world. It's the 5th month." However, this translation may not be what Mitsuhide had intended, as another interpretation of it reads, "The time is now when heaven rules. It's the 5th month." While one interpretation paints Mitsuhide as ambitious in the name of his family and lineage, the other paints him as just and perhaps following what he considers heaven's decree. But I imagine you might also be asking, what is the significance of the 5th month? Hiroaki Sato, in his book On Haiku, elaborates on the potential meaning behind this phrase. Also, Satsuki, swamp month, one of the poetic names of the 5th month by the lunar calendar that year, corresponded exactly to June by the solar calendar, and June makes up the bulk of Japan's rainy season that lasts about 40 days. The word can imply saki, killing intent. Now we have to remember that this poem was written in the company of others, thus for Mitsuhide to have been so openly ambitious as to claim now is the time for the Toki to rule the world would have been somewhat foolish. Because of this, I believe it is far more plausible that the poem was meant to be read the second way, declaring now is the time for heaven to rule. But it must be noted that there has been debate over whether or not Mitsuhide's words have been tampered with in the years following, with some saying that perhaps a true version of the poem is one which is changed slightly to instead say, "We are all one under heaven." However, the truth of the matter is not known. So as far as we can tell, this may be the only ever indication of Mitsuhide's intent prior to what would occur on June 21st, 1582. His actions were swift, his conviction absolute. Mitsuhide turned his army toward Kyoto, ordered his men to assault the Honnoji Temple, and by the end of the night, the first great unifier, Oda Nobunaga, was dead. Of course, Mitsuhide did not stop there. He also ensured the death of Nobunaga's eldest son and heir, Oda Nobutada, who had retreated to Nijo Castle. In all, Mitsuhide's betrayal had been a resounding success. The killing of Nobunaga and his eldest son firmly decapitated the mighty Oda. At the apex of Nobunaga's power, on the precipice of his ultimate victory in unifying Japan, Akechi Mitsuhide assassinated him, and thus changed the course of Japanese history forever. One can only imagine the chaos that night must have been, and the eerie stillness that must have settled over the capital the following morning, as smoke billowed into the sky and the dead were accounted for. Mitsuhide's life would only last roughly another 2 weeks. In this time, he attempted to form his new regime and gain popular support. He is believed to have looted Nobunaga's vast stores of gold and silver, giving away much of it to his loyal vassals and retainers, while presenting a sizable portion of it to the imperial court in hopes of gaining favor from them. We can even note his intentions with the Jesuits when he returned Yasuke to them. Yasuke being the African man who had originally arrived in Japan with the Jesuits and who Nobunaga had taken into his service just a year prior, elevating him to samurai status through granting him various privileges and responsibilities. Yasuke had fought at Nijo for some time, where Oda Nobutada had been during the night of the Honnoji incident. Yet once the castle had been overrun with Akechi forces, and Nobutada slain, had eventually surrendered. Returning Yasuke to the Jesuits can be seen as a move which aimed to hopefully improve their opinion of him. Unfortunately, despite all of his attempts, Mitsuhide was met with difficulty in being seen as anything more than just a traitor. He had hoped that allies such as the Hosokawa and Tsutsui would join him. Instead, they abandoned him. Not even the fact that the Hosokawa were linked to Mitsuhide through the marriage of his daughter to Hosokawa Tadaoki could sway them to his side. In truth, Mitsuhide had but one chance to actually legitimize himself. he needed to win against those who were coming to destroy him. If he could withstand the coming onslaught, more may come to finally join him, and his position could become more entrenched, especially with his domination of the capital. Hashiba Hideyoshi, who had been deep in the west, upon learning of Mitsuhide's betrayal, was quick to make peace with the Mori and rush back east to take on Mitsuhide. His march was swifter than anyone could have imagined, and he was further bolstered by other supporters who joined his ranks along the way. Mitsuhide would attempt to halt him at Yamazaki. It was a hard-fought battle that would go down as one of the greatest of the period. Yet with Mitsuhide outnumbered and unable to claim the key position of Mount Tennozan, he was eventually defeated. Yet Mitsuhide's demise only opens the door to further speculation, because we don't know what truly happened to him. Popular theories claim he was either wounded at the battle and was forced to have a retainer cut off his head and hide it, or perhaps was killed while retreating. Indeed, there was even a head believed to be his which was presented and eventually buried. Yet significant evidence to say that it was actually his head or not is inconclusive. In all likelihood, Mitsuhide did die here, whether or not it was his head. However, there is one fascinating theory about his fate that has some very interesting evidence to potentially back it up. This is the theory that perhaps Mitsuhide, in defeat, did actually manage to escape, going on to change his name and take up a new identity as none other than a monk by the name of Nankobo Tenkai. Tenkai would famously come to serve Tokugawa Ieyasu, earning the nickname the Black-Robed Chancellor. Various connections have been made linking him to Mitsuhide, such as the unknown first half of his life, his usage of the Chinese bellflower of Mitsuhide's kamon, a set of armor that he supposedly wore, and even a monument erected on Mount Hiei, supposedly donated by Mitsuhide after 1582. There are many more small details as well, so it has driven further curiosity into the matter. And although this is a theory which is not widely accepted, it still provides a unique explanation into what may have happened to such a significant and influential figure. In the end, Akechi Mitsuhide will always remain as perhaps Japan's greatest unsolved mystery. And although it is easy to simply point at his actions as being done out of greater ambition to rule Japan himself, I believe that by further examining what we know about his actual character, we may come to find that his intent was potentially more out of what he believed to be what was just and right. That he believed he could serve the nation better and with more integrity than Nobunaga ever could. But I imagine we will never fully understand the truth. Thank you for watching. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell if you enjoyed this video and found it to be most informative.